All right, we were unable to finish, or I feel like go through logging in slowly, and also wasn't able to take many questions. So I am going to take a few minutes now just to share my screen. I went ahead and I finished up the logging out, and just want to talk through what I did so y'all have access to this. This isn't normal. We don't normally do this when we finish lessons, but I felt like I have some extra time right now, and I would like to offer that to y'all. So I'm gonna show you my login spec. And for now, I am going to, I'm just gonna skip over this test for now and kind of talk through again what we were doing in class. I think, let me actually comment out. Let's comment out all of this. Just talk through up until this point. I think this is what your lesson plan had up until just like making sure that there was a welcome message. So for logging in order to log in a user, you need to have a user created. So we have that on line 5, creating a user. And then we're visiting our home page, our root path, and we want to click this link, I already have an account, which is going to take us to a login page where we're going to be able to fill out our username and password. And when we click the button on that form to log in, we should be taken to the root page where I should also see this flash message pop up. So running this should all still work. Cool. And let's just like walk through this one more time. So I already have an account on the index page. We have this, I already have an account. Don't worry about all of this right now. This was added later. And this is going to /login. Should we take a look at our routes? We can see that our /login or get/login goes to users, new login. We take a look at our users controller. Our new login action doesn't have anything in it. Responsibility of that is to just render a view for us. So new login.html.erb. What this has in here is title that just says login. We also have this form here for logging in. It's going to go to the post login path. And in here we have our text fields for username, as well as the password field for our password, and the submit button down here as well. When we hit this login button and we're taken to the post/login route, let's take a look at the routes again. Post/login. This gets routed to our users controller and then to the login user action, which we can see over here. To just get this test to pass, the only part that I have uncommented is really just expecting the root path and having a flash message. The only thing that I needed for that was to be able to find the user that was trying to log in, to be able to display welcome, whoever it was, if they actually got authenticated correctly, and also redirecting them to the root path. So in here, like originally with this test, I think the only things that I needed were a flash message and that redirect. So find the user, flash a message welcoming them to their profile, whatever it is, and redirect them to that root page. So if we run this, again, with just these two getting tested, oh, did I not save that? Didn't save it. Let's run it again. And let me take off. Yeah, I was running the wrong thing the whole time. It's okay, still passes. Okay, so yeah, we skipped that test. So yeah, we're getting redirected to the root page, and then we also see that flash message coming through. The issue with this is that we aren't authenticating the actual user when they're trying to log in. We're really saying right now that as long as we have your username in our database, then yeah, come on in. You can go ahead and get a welcome message. So before doing that, what we need to do is we need to actually make sure not only that they have their username, that we have their username stored in the database, but that we also have the correct credentials. So in here, we couldn't, let me put it right in here. If I were to run this, let's pause it here. and say in here, my params have password. If I were to take a look at found user and say, does my found user's password equal the password that came in through my params? This would be false, because currently my found user.password, well, let's actually take a look at this. Found user.password is nil. I should have had this say found user.password digest, since that's what's stored in our database. Password digest. We're still getting that false. Again, reason being because the password, or the password digest that we're actually storing, we're not storing the plain text password, is this hashed string. So in order to actually check to see if what they sent us matches what we have in our database for that user's password, we need to send this through the same hashing algorithm and then check to see if what comes from this is also what we have stored in the database. Bcrypt has the method authenticate, and so that's what we used here. We kind of talked about this a little bit in class. But what I can do here is, let me just copy that. Use this that says found user.authenticate params password. And what that's saying is, check this password that came in through the params, this plain string password, and check to see, authenticate to see if this plain string password, once hashed, it's going to send it through the hashing algorithm, is the same as what we have stored in the password digest for that found user in our table. And we get back the user, which tells us also true. If I were to say, let's say, like, instead of params : password, if I were to say I love cats, pass it that string, we get back false. So again, pass it the correct string, we get back the user, so it's truthy. Pass it the wrong string, we get back false. So that's what I'm doing here. And the test for this, let's actually go, let's skip through all of this for right now, and let's unskip. So yeah, keep this commented out. And I want to check to make sure that I can't log in with incorrect password. So this one here, I'm putting in I love cats. When I click the button login, I should see that I get taken to the login path again. And that I have this, like, your username or password are incorrect. So let's run this test. Let me get rid of this. Oops. Save the test. Jeez. Okay. And I'm getting expected the current path to equal the login path. And this is my test on line 46. So we've gone through all of that. We've entered username, we've entered the wrong password for that user, and we're clicking login, and we're saying we want it to be on this login path. But currently we're getting routed to the root path right here. And if we take a look, or I guess we kind of like already put a pry in to see that when we authenticated with the wrong password, passing it the wrong password, we got false back. So if we were to get past the wrong password, that after encrypting and using this authenticate method, we got back false, then we would want to redirect to a different page, different path, and also flash a different message. So I'm going to comment this back in. And the reason why I have this here first is if I didn't have it, which we didn't get to this in class. If I were to just put this here of like, if found user to authenticate and pass it the password, if found user, like if nothing came back when I tried to find the user with this certain string username, and if I didn't get anything back, then this found user would be nil. And so then we would get an error saying like, can't call authenticate method on nil. So before even authenticating, I'm just going to check to make sure that found user is something, and then I can go ahead and authenticate, because this to the right of this and is not going to evaluate unless this evaluates to something other than falsy. So found user is truthy. We are able to find a user, and then let's go ahead and authenticate that found user. And this is, oh yeah, we didn't put this in yet. Let me keep that out for now. Cool. So if we didn't have the right credentials, go ahead and flash this message of your username or password are incorrect, and then go ahead and redirect to /login, or we could have said to the login path. Let's run it. Okay, cool. So we have our sad path working all right. We passed it the wrong password. It's working well because of this conditional that we put in within this action. The last thing that we wanted to check, and I kind of did this out of order in the lesson, so my apologies, that I think the order I did it in didn't make the most sense. The next thing that I want to check is that as soon as someone logs in, they have different links. So before you log in, you should have an option to either sign up to register or log in as a existing user. So those links should be present before you log in. But after we've logged in, we're going to have some type of conditional logic that needs to happen to say, like, if you're logged in, then go ahead and just display the logout message. Don't display the message or the links that say that you can register or that you can log in with an existing account. So that's what we're testing here. Expect it once we've logged in to not have the link of I already have an account, and then to not have the link of sign up to be a user. Is that what I called it in the index? Register as a user, right? Yeah, register as a user. Okay. But we do want it to have the link of log out. Okay, so running this, I get expected not to find I already have an account, but it's on the page. So this is where we're going to need some conditional logic within our view. And that's where this came in. So originally we didn't have any of this. And we just had these two links. What I decided to put in was a helper method. Oops. Was a helper method that would allow us to see if we had a current user. There's logic that we need to put into this current user helper method to tell us if we had someone that had already logged in on this application and on that specific browser. And if we had a current user, then go ahead and display that link logout. Otherwise, that means they're not logged in. So let's go ahead and display register as a user, and I already have an account links, those options. So what this current user is, and I think that this isn't something that is maybe unfamiliar to y'all, but to have a helper method that we can use like within multiple views, or just any view really based off of logic from our session, we do need to have that at our controller level. At our controller level, we can take a look at what we have in our session. And since our application controller, we're inheriting our application controller in all of our controllers, we can go ahead and put this here so that any view that we have that's rendered from any controller action will have access to this current user method. And the reason why I have it here, you could also just put this in the user's controller, or you could put it in the welcome controller, wherever you necessarily needed it. But the likelihood of me like continuing to build out this application and need to have some conditional within my view based off of if someone was logged in or not is pretty likely for that to continue happening. So that's why I decided to put it in the application controller. And what I have in here is we don't necessarily need this at current user, but it kind of helps with like optimizing. So I'm going to take it out right now and explain what's here. So this current user, this like helper method current user allows us to use it in the view. But what this method is doing, anytime that we call current user, it's going to say, find the user that has a user ID key in the session hash. And again, that session hash is created automatically on that browser. It's actually put on a cookie, the session, and it's sent back and forth between the client and the server. And we store it on the cookie so that when we make other requests that require a user to be logged in, we don't need to keep asking the user to log in with every single request that we make to the application, to the server. So we're going to have to put this logic of like storing a user ID in the session in our controller action when we're logging a user in. But the idea here is if we have stored a user ID in the session, that means that we've already authenticated a user that's tried to log in. And so if there's a user ID present, then go ahead and find that user with their user ID. The reason why this was here before was if I kept coming back to this page, when I look at current user the first time, it's going to go ahead and find that user and store it into this variable. That way it doesn't necessarily need to evaluate the right-hand side of this over and over and over again. Okay, so let's go ahead, run this. I don't know what I've commented, what I've uncommented. Let's see. Okay. So expected it to not have this link. I have an account expected. Yeah, okay. So we're still getting this, I already have an account. What's happening right now is in this user's controller, I have this commented out at the moment, but we haven't ever actually set a user ID in that session. And so this is constantly evaluating to nil, which if we take a look back at our view for our index, if this evaluates, this current user evaluates to new because we've never set a user ID, then it's always going to display these two links down here. So in our user's controller, after we've said, yep, we found the user and we've authenticated that that user has the correct credentials to be able to log in, then we can go ahead in here and set that value with the key of user ID in our session. And then go ahead through with flashing the success message, redirecting to that root page. Save. What is wrong with me? Please. Okay, cool. So we have those passing. And then let's take a look at our test one more time. Oh, there it is. Login spec. So if we were to click log out, then kind of already have this set up here. Let's just talk through it. So when I click the link log out, again, in our index, we're saying, let's make this link log out and let's have it go to /logout. When we click log out, then we want to go to the root path. We shouldn't see the logout link anymore, but now that we've logged out, we should see those other two links. So taking a look at the routes, this is kind of unique. I have this set as both a get and a delete. Excuse me. The reason being is because with this link to log out, that's automatically going to be a get. I could also override this and say like method delete, but I have it set as a get in my routes then, since that's going to default to a get. And then I also added this like delete logout, just kind of so that it can't be used for anything else. Just kind of like a placeholder. But what I could also do is just get rid of this get /logout, and then in my index.html, and here I could also just say like method destroy. So my routes, when I go to logout user, let's go ahead and go to logout user. I'm going to put a prime here just to make sure I'm still hitting that after updating which method. Oops, delete, not destroy. Index, delete. My bad. Try it again. Cool. So yeah, now I'm telling it to go to the delete logout user action. And so in here then, what I have is in order to log someone out, like the only reason why we know that someone is logged in is because we have a user ID key within the session. And if that user ID doesn't have a value to it, then if it returns nil, like over here in application, oops. Right here, session user ID, if we set it to nil, or if we even just clear it out, it's going to come back as empty. The value of this, how this is going to evaluate, it's going to come back as nil. So it's not going to assign a user to current user. So we're saying reset session user ID to be nil. There's a ton of ways you could do this. I wouldn't destroy the whole session in case you had other keys in there, but you could destroy that specific key and then go ahead and redirect to that root path. Let's run it. And we get all passing tests. Okay, the last part of this, and I wasn't planning on doing it, but I'm going to do it. The last part of this was a workshop. And I think just so we have a little example of this, I'm going to do this as I record at the moment. So the workshop was talking about refactoring this into a sessions controller. Essentially what we're doing with this like new login, login user, logout user is we are creating a session. Really, we're adding a key and a value to the session. Even though like session isn't something that is stored in the database, we can still have a controller that tells us that we're controlling something about the session. And what I'm going to do for this refactor is instead of having all three of these, let me just copy all of them, get rid of them for now. Instead of having all of that as non-RESTful actions in our users controller, I can have them as as RESTful actions in a sessions controller. So let's do a class sessions controller. I'm just going to paste this in here. There's going to be a few things that I'm going to have to refactor here. One of those is the routes they're going to have to change. Instead of going to users for logging in and logging out and displaying a new login, I'm going to have it go to sessions controller. And let's see what else I'd have to change. Since I changed that from users, oh, I guess the other thing I'll have to change here is this used to be, since it's a view for this new login, it was nested under the users folder within views. And so I think in views, I'm also going to have to create a folder for sessions. And then I'm just going to pull this new login into sessions. Yep, move it. And again, the whole reason why we're doing this is to make it more RESTful. So let's rename these. Let's say this is just new, which means in my view, I'm also going to have to rename this to new.html.erb. This, what are we essentially doing here? So login user, we're creating a new session. So let's have this be a create. And then this logout user, we're destroying the session, the logout or login session. So now that I've changed these, this was the only one that had a view. So I had to change that file name, but I do then also need to change these actions to match up with the new actions that I created. Create and destroy. Okay. Let's run it. Okay, we got our login spec working. Let's run everything. Got all of our examples working. So there we go. We have refactored into a sessions controller. All right, y'all. Hopefully this was helpful if you decided to watch it. And yeah, thanks for holding on today. All right, see y'all.